Hello and what is up everyone, Thunderbob here, and tonight I am talking about some more Diablo 2 Resurrected. I've had a ton of people ask, out of the many characters that I've played on the channel, what is my favorite, and I wanted to do a video where I go over my favorite starting builds for each class. Now I'm not claiming these are the best builds in the game or even the best starting builds, but they're builds that I think are effective to start with and builds that I actually personally enjoy. And I really think that each person should pick a character and build that they enjoy playing and don't just go with whatever the meta is currently. If you do want to see some tier lists, I saw a really good one out there from Mr. Llama. Just, maybe check that out. But here are some of my personal favorite ladder start or new release start characters and what I actually plan to start with when the game comes out. So I'm going to spend just a minute or two going through each of the classes. I'm going to focus on one build per class, and I'm going to spend a few minutes weighing the pros and cons and why I chose that build. And I'll have some links in the description that will show you gameplay from each of these builds. Okay, so the first character that I'm going to recommend, and the first one that I intend to create at release of Diablo 2 Resurrected, is a Meteorb Sorceress. This is, of course, a sorceress who focuses on the skills Frozen Orb and Fireball/Meteor. Now, this is a hybrid build, so your maximum damage is not going to be as high as Sorceress who focuses on one element. But it does allow you to deal with multiple types of immunities, and you can generally play all the way through Hell difficulty solo if you'd like, and not have to skip content like some of the other character classes may have to do, especially when you're first leveling up. It's a fairly good build right from the beginning. You can start with Fire and transition to Frozen Orb at 30 pretty effectively. I've got a video that shows how to do that without too much difficulty. Normal, you can own Fireball using, and then Nightmare, Frozen Orb just destroys it completely. And then when you transition to Hell, you can continue from there, or you could use your respec if you'd like to focus on one or the other. Now, Blizzard probably has the higher total damage, but you are a bit more limited on where you can farm, and I just personally enjoy Frozen Orb better than Blizzard. Lightning, kind of the same way. Lightning, I think, maxed out with really good gear, does more damage than this build, but again, it needs pretty specialized gear to be effective, and you really need Infinity if you want to go with the Lightning build, unfortunately. So it kind of limits your playstyle. But overall, Meteorb is a build I've messed around with quite a bit, and I really enjoy. I think it is a good starting point and a good first character to check out. Okay, so the second character that I am intending to make is going to be a Lightning Trap Assassin. If it was not for teleport on the Sorceress, I might start with the Trap Assassin. I really enjoy this character a lot. I had a really high level one years ago, and it's a really fun build. But teleport does kind of trump, I think, all the other characters as a start. You don't have to go Sorceress, but I think you get a big advantage for farming and just for moving through the axe quickly. It gives you quite a bit of a leg up. But Lightning Trap Assassin is a good alternative. They've got a very effective build right from the beginning. You can start with fire traps in normal and then transition to lightning trap by respecking later, and you'll be great during normal and all the way through hell difficulty, even with pretty mediocre gear. They do gear up pretty easily. You can actually shop for a lot of your gear. You can shop for claws pretty easily in Act 5 and get potentially +6 to trap claws if you're want to spend enough time on it. It's a very fun build. It does have some negatives, like dealing with immunities is somewhat of a problem. You can focus on Fire Blast or go hybrid with like a kick. A lot of people do a Kixin Trap Assassin, or use your Death Sentry traps to deal Corpse Explosion, which is half physical as well, and that'll help. But overall, it does have some difficulties with lightning immune enemies. You do get some speed maneuvering through your Burst of Speed skill also, and through the teleport kick. So even though you don't have teleport, you do have some movement abilities and maneuvering abilities, which is nice. But overall, it's probably going to be my second character I create. Okay, and my third character that I intend to make is a pretty popular build. This is maybe arguably a lot of people's opinion the strongest character in the game. This is the Blessed Hammer, the Hammerdin Paladin, and this is a really good character. It has very few weaknesses and a lot of advantages, and in some ways is maybe a little overpowered. It's good while leveling up, it's good at high level. Blessed Hammer is magic damage, so it's really effective at farming almost anywhere in the game because there's not a lot of magic immunities out there. The majority of the damage come from skills, so even with mediocre gear, it scales pretty well just from gaining levels and pumping up your skills and your synergies. It can use hand-me-down gear from like my Sorceress, so I'm going to make my Sorceress first, and this will probably be my third or fourth character. And things like Spirit that I made for my Sorceress, I can just transition over, and that's great gear for a Hammerdin. With some gear swap or with a respec, you can turn your Blessed Hammerdin into like a 1-point smite hybrid or just a straight smiter to be able to take down Ubers later. I think having a character that's good at Ubers is pretty important. And the character really shines when you can put together like Enigma and you can teleport and you can do your telestomp. It's like a really, really powerful character when you get the right gear together. Negative is very cookie cutter, and gear might be hard to find because there are going to be a ton of Hammerdins out there, probably second only to Sorceresses when the game first comes out. But overall, it's a fun build, a little bit cutter and maybe overplayed, but I do intend to make one and probably transform it into like a Blessed Hammer Smiter hybrid in the long run. And next up is an Amazon, a Lightning Fury Amazon to be specific. This is my favorite Amazon build. It's another character I'm rebuilding from years ago. It's really fun, and it's amazing to watch these Lightning Furies just clear the entire screen. You take this into cows, and it just wrecks everything. This is, in my opinion, the fastest and most efficient cow killer in the game. The character, though, has some negatives. It's very, very gear dependent. This is probably the most gear dependent character I have on my recommendations. That's why it's a little bit lower on the list. When you get the gear, it's very, very powerful. But until then, you can run into some problems. It also has some issues with immunities unless you go more of a hybrid build. There's a couple of ways you can hybridize this. You do some physical damage, but the majority of your damage is going to be from the Lightning Fury itself, not from the javelin you're throwing. Restocking your javelins is also kind of annoying and costly, and just something that slows down your farming until you get some better gear. But overall, it's my favorite Amazon build, and it would probably be a little bit higher if it wasn't, something that's so hard to gear up for. Okay, so the next character I'm planning on making is a Summon Necromancer, or a Fishymancer is the hybrid that I'm kind of looking toward. This is a Necromancer who focuses on summoning skeletons, using Corpse Explosion, using your other 1-point wonders to be effective. And this is one of the most powerful and strongest starting hardcore characters in my opinion. And I think when Ladder comes out, I'm thinking about trying out hardcore particularly. So the next two characters are going to be hardcore characters. They're kind of lower on the list because Ladder's not going to be the right at release. So these will probably be the first when Ladder actually starts. This is a powerful character who doesn't have a lot of negatives. It's not the quickest, not the fastest character, but it's probably one of the safest characters. So you have a huge amount of survivability for hardcore difficulty between having a ton of summons between you and your enemies, having bone armor, having bone prism. You can lock down your enemies and be relatively protected. You can also slow bosses and enemies using Decrepify and Clay Golem, lock down bosses to some extent. Has a lot of great one-point wonder skills that can help you and your team. While it is a very safe build, it is a bit slower until you get some better gear. You can run all the way through Hell difficulty with no gear at all. I've seen naked runs with a Summon Necromancer, but you're going to be doing it a little bit slower. It can be frustrating until you get teleport either through Enigma or through like a teleport wand, because the summons like to go wherever the hell they want. But Enigma allows you to kind of corral them and bring them with you. So this is a build that really benefits from having Enigma and kind of telestomping on enemies. Though in hardcore, that's not always the best option, because if you teleport onto like Stygian Pact and your guys hit it and explode, then you get one shot. Things like that happen. So it's you know, you have to kind of balance that, the risk versus reward of using teleport in hardcore. They're decent with mid-level gear, and it's not too difficult to find kind of mid-level gear. High-end gear can be a bit expensive. Enigma, as I said, is pretty high-end and is going to be pretty expensive. But overall, I think this is one of the best hardcore starting characters. You're very protected, you have huge survivability, and relatively easy to get all the way through Hell, even with no gear at all. Another ladder hardcore character that I want to try out. Specifically, this is a Fury Druid. This is a character that I had back in the day. I had a level 92 hardcore Druid who passed away, and I mourn him every year still. Just kidding. But I really do want to try to relive that character. I do think that a Windy Druid is almost certainly a better starting character. So if you're just looking for like the most powerful, Windy Druid is probably better. But I personally want a melee character, and I want to relive the Fury Druid I had a long time ago. But I don't think it's as bad as some people make it out to be. I've seen it kind of in the middle of some tier lists, but I think it has some benefits for hardcore in particular. It has a huge life pool through Lycanthropy and Oak Sage, and Oak Sage also benefits your team, and a lot of people love you for it, especially in hardcore. Feral Rage also provides some really useful and early lifesteal, and it scales incredibly well. You know, you can get 130% lifesteal at the maximum level. So that will keep you alive for a very long time in hardcore. You also have your Grizzly Bear, or you can use some wolves to keep some space between you and getting mauled by all the enemies at once. With your mercenary, and you have some protection. While most melee characters are pretty difficult to gear, I find the Fury Druid is actually a little bit easier. They can be effective with one or two-handers, and actually two-handers they're really, really good with. And I feel like a lot of people overlook two-handers, and you might have an easier time when the ladder starts actually finding a decent two-hander or trading for a decent two-hander. There's also a lot of good rune words you can make for two hands. Insight, Obedience, even Edge comes to mind. Not a lot of people realize this, but Fury Druids and Shapeshifter Druids can use bows with their Shapeshift abilities. So that's something to keep in mind as well. The biggest weakness they have is dealing with physical immunities. There are some hybrid builds you can go with to avoid this. You can also give your mercenary something like Reaper's Toll to cast Decrepify on the enemies, but that's probably going to be the biggest problem with a straight Fury Druid is physical immunities. Okay, last but certainly not least is the Barbarian. And the Barbarian was actually the first class I beat Diablo 2 with shortly after the release. And it used to be one of my favorite classes. I used to love Whirlwind, but I feel like it's hard to make work these days. It's not impossible, and with the right gear, you can be pretty effective, but it's very gear intensive, and even with really good gear, Whirlwind has some problems. I've actually had better luck with Frenzy, and that's where I'm planning on building as a Frenzy Barbarian. It's just a fun, incredibly fun ability and build. The insane attack and run speed it provides is just, it's fun. It's you can move through areas and you don't have teleport, but you're running at 130 goddamn percent. It's really awesome. Because of that insane speed boost, Enigma is not as required as some of the other classes, and you can probably get around that. Getting 2 good weapons can be difficult for Frenzy, especially when you're leveling up. Unless you get lucky or make some rune words, it can be difficult. Dealing with immunities is not a problem because you've got Berserk, which does tons of magical damage even at lower points. When they're well equipped, they can be pretty effective at dealing with most areas, but getting that gear is going to take some time. And even with that high-end gear, there are other classes that are just going to be more efficient. This isn't the most efficient farmer, though you do have find item, which lets you kind of double down. So in some ways, it makes up for it. I think they're one of the slower clearing speeds, but find item does make up for that to some extent. My end goal is based around a kind of ridiculous meme build that someone sent that is based around having a ton of crazy procs where you're constantly sending out like frozen orbs and all kinds of attacks. And I'm going to link to a video showing that build. But that would be pretty far down the line if I have some ridiculous wealth and gear towards the end of my career, I would say. So there you have it. Those are the builds for each of the classes that I intend to start with. I think I'm going to try to make one of each class in the long run. It might take me 6 months or a year, but that's what I'd like to do, is to get each of the 7 classes, maybe not to 99, but into the 80s and make them effective in hell difficulty. Again, these are not necessarily the best builds in the game, but they're builds that I enjoy. And really, I think that you should pick builds that you have fun with, regardless of how powerful they are, regardless of what other people think. Play what you enjoy. That's my thoughts on it. If you have some comments or opinions on this list, or you want to post your own list, I'd love to see it, and I'll give you some comments and thoughts of my own. But thank you again for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you again. Have a good night, everyone.